Hello, I'm Anthony Horowitz and welcome to my flat in Clerkenwell, London. You've been voting, but here are my 5 favourite villains. In 5th place, we start with Herod Sale, the villain in Stormbreaker, whose plan is to poison every school in Britain by sending in computers, the Stormbreakers, which contain a secret virus which is going to kill all the children in England. The reason? He was bullied as a boy by the Prime Minister after he came over to England in his childhood. He was born in Lebanon. His father was a failed hairdresser. I'm not quite sure why, but that detail always amuses me. I have a certain amount of sympathy for Herod Sale. He's been the victim of bullying and racism. He's been ostracised from British society. I think he has a reason to be a bad guy. And he also appears in my first book. That's why he's on the list. In 4th place, we have Magnus Payne. You may not even remember that name. He's not a main villain. He's a sidekick. He turns up in Archangel as an eco-terrorist going under the name of Casper. You'll remember him because he's bald and he has the whole map of the world tattooed across his face. There's America on this side, Europe on this side, and Australia somewhere underneath his chin. Now, there's a rule in the Alex Rider books: the worse the villain, the greater and more unpleasant their death. And I think Magnus gets one of the worst deaths in any of the books. It actually takes place in outer space, and that's why he's here on this list. Choice number 3 takes us to Snakehead and Major Winston Yu, who is the head of the criminal organization known as the Snakehead and who also works for Scorpio. His mother was an assassin who actually worked and killed many people simply to pay his school fees at Harrow. He joined briefly the British Secret Service, but he got sidetracked and forced to retire because he had an interesting illness, brittle bone disease. Now, in the James Bond books, lots of the villains have interesting illnesses, ailments or peculiarities, and this is certainly one of them and leads to his own quite interesting death at the end of the book. Winston Yu loves Britain. That's another interesting thing about him. He's always going on about British tea and British food and British sport, even as he's trying to blow up Britain. Psychopathic or what? In 2nd place, General Sarov in Skeleton Key. Now, his plan is to cause a nuclear accident by blowing up a submarine in Murmansk, simply to bring communism back into the world. And so he has this elaborate plan. He is himself a former general in the Russian army. His son was killed in Afghanistan, and this is what makes him interesting. When he meets Alex Rider, who is the same age as his son, he tries to adopt him. So you have the villain of the book trying to adopt the hero of the book, which leads to a very peculiar and slightly unsettling relationship. And what I really like about Sarov is that after Herod Sale in book number 1 and Dr. Grief in book number 2, I think he's the first real villain, by which I mean he's a real human being with real emotions, and his death is surprisingly poignant and even sad at the end of the book. And I've always liked him, and he's number 2 on my list. But he's just pipped to the post by my favourite villain of them all. His name is Abdul Aziz Al-Razim, and he is the villain in the very last Alex Rider book, Scorpio Rising. And he comes first principally because he is the most unpleasant, cold-blooded, nastiest villain of them all. He's trying to frame Alex Rider for an assassination in a very elaborate attempt by Scorpio to undermine British intelligence for quite complicated reasons. He lives out in the Sahara Desert where he has a little fort and he smokes Black Devil cigarettes. A lot of my villains smoke, they don't realize how bad it is for them. But what makes him really special is that he's doing these experiments. He's worked out that in science, a lot of units of measurement are named after famous people. The kilowatt, the watt, the joule, Fahrenheit. These are all named after famous scientists. And he realizes there is no measurement for pain. And so what he's doing is he's kidnapping tourists and secret agents, anybody he can get his hands on, and he is causing them pain simply to measure the results and create a scale of pain, which he will then name after himself. And of course, Alex ends up in his laboratory. For sheer breathtaking unpleasantness, Razim has to come first.